Rashabhavan Santanikas Chapirbo Naleve Tasu Santatim Paudravayo Janma Vidyeshvarya Shriyadvi Sampanasya Gunai Sarvesh Chintabanya Paterabhut Rupaudarya Vayojanha Vidyeshvarya Shriyadvi Sampanasya Gune Sarvesh Chintabanya Paterabhut Rupaudarya Vayojanha Vidyeshvarya Shriyadvi Sampanasya Gune Sarvesh Chintabanda Paterabhut. Word for word for text 12. Rupa, with beauty. Odarya, magnanimity. Vaya, youth. Janma, aristocratic birth. Vidya, education. Aishvarya, opulence. Shriya Adibi, wealth, and so on. Sampanasya, endowed. Gunai, with good qualities. Sarvaya, all. Chinta, anxiety. Banda Pate, of Chitraketu, the husband of so many sterile wives. Abut, there was. Translations and purports by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhagavatam Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This Chitraketu had 10 million wives, but although he was capable of producing children, he did not receive a child from any of them. By chance, all the wives were barren. Chitraketu, the husband of these millions of wives, was endowed with a beautiful form, magnanimity, and youth. He was born in a high family. He had a complete education, and he was wealthy and opulent. Nevertheless, in spite of being endowed with all these assets, he was full of anxiety because he did not have a son. Report. It appears that the king first married one wife, but she could not bear a child. Then he married a second, a third, a fourth, and so on. But none of the wives could bear children. In spite of the material assets of Jamanishvara Shrutashri, birth in an aristocratic family with full opulence, wealth, education, and beauty, he was very much aggrieved because in spite of having so many wives, he had no son. Certainly, his grief was natural. Grihastha life does not mean having a wife and no children. Janaka Pandit says, Putrekinam Griham Shunyam. If a family man has no son, his home is no better than a desert. The king was certainly most unhappy that he could not get a son, and this is why he had married so many wives. Kshatriyas, especially, are allowed to marry more than one wife, and this king did so. Nonetheless, he had no issue. Om Ganachamandasya Ginan Shakaya Chakshumitanan Hasmai. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Our devotees, sorry I was a little late. So we are reading about the story of King Chitraketu. There in the beginning of the prequel, you would say, to the story of Vritasura, which we have just spent the last few weeks discussing. And it's pointed out in these verses that Chitraketu, because he desired a son, uh, married, but his wife was unable to bear children. So he married a second wife who was also unable to bear children. And so on until he had 10 million wives. This is instructive about the reality of karma. We understand uh, by the instructions of the Vedic literatures, uh, the words of the acharyas, also when we get into the scientific and logical arguments about reincarnation, that all of us have lived many lives before, and possibly we'll have, at the very least, uh, one more life, hopefully in the spiritual world, um, which is the goal, but otherwise have many more lives. And all these lives, we perform activities which are counted for or against us in the form of karmic reactions. It's not, as many people claim today, that the universe is simply a collection of random events where nothing matters and uh, everything just happens by random chance. No, there is an intelligence behind the universe. And part of that intelligence is the cosmic justice system of karma. And no matter what we do materially, for the most part, we can't change what our karma is. Chitraketu was trying to have a son, but because he did not have the karma to have a son, he married 10 million wives, and all of them were unable to bear children. And if he married another 10 million wives, all of them would also be unable to bear children. Because the laws of karma are inescapable on a material platform. But still, we try to adjust. We are met with the miseries of material existence. Of course, karma brings both material happiness and material miseries, but nobody complains or tries to avoid the material happiness, which is actually what leads to the material miseries. Because generally, it's not that the miseries are coming on their own. It's that we are trying to be happy in this world, and by that endeavor, we get entangled in so many awkward situations, which lead to suffering. But when the miseries come, we try to adjust. Try to attain the assets of Janmashvarya Shruta Shri, have good opulence, wealth, education, beauty, etc. But the opulence of these assets is not actually able to give us relief from our suffering. And if they do, it's only momentary and very little. It is not that there's complete relief. And even if there is any form of relief, it generally comes with so much more entanglement. So, for example, one might say, one might be poverty stricken or not have very much material wealth. So one thinks, oh, I will, go to this university and get a degree so that a better employer will hire me, which seems like a good plan, at least from the perspective that we have. But actually, one has to take on so many forms of distress to get that degree. One has to perform the austerities of uh, staying up sometimes late at night in order to study for one's classes. One has to deal sometimes with unreasonable professors or other students. Usually, these days, one has to take out so many student loans and be saddled with that, sometimes for decades. And sometimes even, one spends, 4 or 5 years getting these degrees. And then by the time one graduates, uh, what one learns is useless anyway. I hear this sometimes happens a lot with technology degrees, things in that area, because technology is moving so quickly. Depending on how the program is set up, by the time you learn whatever you're learning, it's already obsolete. And then you can't get employed anyway. So in no instance can one escape one's karma. But one sees, so I gave an example on kind of what the personal level could be, but even on a societal level, there is so much hmm, trying to have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. There is a bit of discussion during the discussion portion of class yesterday uh, about kind of how the environmentalists approach sustainability. And it is illustrating this point very clearly that we try to live lives of sense gratification and uh, then through that endeavor pollute the environment, give so much distress to Mother Earth. And then the way that it's generally said to fix it is, don't use so much plastic, walk to work instead of driving, ride on a bike. While in the meanwhile, you're using, you're involved in a system that has so much exploitation of the earth in forms of pollution and other things. And it is, trying to, because the mentality is that we, in that case, that we're trying to still enjoy sense gratification while trying to deal with the deleterious effects of that sense gratification. But one actually can't have one without the other, especially if one is having this sense gratification in a way that is adharmic, that is not according to the proper means of using various things, various objects, or of living one's life. because there actually is a proper and an improper way to live one's life. There is a somewhat of an ethos in today's culture, widely speaking, that is very, one could say libertarian. You do your thing and I do my thing, and I won't say anything about the way that you're living. You won't say anything about the way that I'm living, and we'll all just, do what we can and try to edge out little domains of sense gratification. But this actually isn't the Christian conscious or Vedic or even philosophical view on things. Prabhupada, there's apparently a book was popular. Prabhupada was performing his pastimes, his manifest pastimes. Maybe some of more senior community is called something like "I'm okay, you're okay." And Prabhupada one time heard or saw the title of this book, and he said, "This is nonsense philosophy. What we are saying is that we're okay, you're not okay." Speaking of general materialistic society, because according to the will of Krishna, the system that he set up, different things have purposes. It's not that when one takes on some duty or some way of living, or even a certain type of body, that one simply does whatever one wants because, it was just guided by the mm, impersonal forces of evolution. And there's no controller, no ultimate goal, and I just have to get whatever I want to get. The Bhagavad Gita actually explains that this mentality is asura, uh, that is the mentality of the asuras. The actual understanding is that we go through our life based on dharma in order to use the human form of life for its intended purpose, which is, of course, the elevation of spiritual consciousness. Everything in the Vedic system is pointed towards the elevation of spiritual consciousness, towards developing this love of Krishna. So, and it is set up in a way that one does not waste the human form of life with ideas such as, uh, you know, oh, whatever you're doing is okay, whatever anybody does, as long as it only concerns them, is a proper way to live life. No, there are better ways to live life and worse ways to live life, meaning that there are ways to live life that are in line with the goal of human life, and ways that are not in line with the goal of human life. And we should try to live as much as possible in line with the goal of human life, which is to surrender to Krishna. Of course, we shouldn't become proud, saying like, "Oh, I'm surrendered to Krishna and nobody else is," uh, because one of the qualities of a devotee is humility. But of course, we also have to understand what this humility is. Actual humility is thinking, "Oh, all of these other people are such better servants of Krishna than I am." Not that, "Oh, I won't think of this, you know, are not that we have, uh, are not that we condone every sort of thing, or just have a live and let live attitude in the name of humility. Because, this humility or compassion, or kind of attitude, as I mentioned last time, isn't really the highest form of compassion. The doctor, and I'll give you the example last time as well. If the doctor, in the name of compassion, refuses to cut into his patient who needs surgery, that is a nonsense form of compassion. It's actually doing more harm than good. And factually, we can see that uh, the material world, the materialistic civilization, is very much in need of surgery. Actually, they've done studies on city life and the cities, Prabhupada sometimes called fortresses of Maya. And actually, pretty much every form of mental illness that they've studied this question on correlates positively with urbanicity, with city life. Uh, and just, one can analyze in so many different ways. And we should tell people about this. If people will listen, mm, if we speak gently, then we can tell them gently. Sometimes people only listen if we speak forcefully, in which case we should speak forcefully and pray to Krishna or the intelligence to figure out when to speak one way and when to speak the other. So we should understand actually how hmm, how actually the modern materialistic form of so-called civilization is actually just leading to more and more suffering for everyone. We or most of us at least, come from this materialistic civilization. And it can be difficult sometimes to overcome the conditioning that we have from it. And this takes so many different forms. I know in my own personal example, it took me a while to actually fully, or to a great extent, maybe there's some still there, the to overcome the conditioning of what one could call scientism. This uh, lauding or putting on a pedestal of science. Of course, was educated in the sciences, if one wants to call it that. Uh, and for a long time, even after reading Prabhupada's books, there's still these seeds of contamination in my consciousness. And for other people, it is different things. Maya has her own personalized program for each of us. But we should understand by reflection on our own personal lives, and ultimately through reading Prabhupada's books, hearing Prabhupada's lectures, listening to preaching in various forms, that this materialistic civilization is actually not even good for the material benefit of people, let alone the spiritual advancement of the populace. I was making the point yesterday during the discussion session that, Krishna thought it was better for the living entities to, have, uh, computers and cell phones and plastic and jet planes. He could have easily made all these things. It's not that, um, by the force of time, we are becoming more advanced. The Lord Brahma, Krishna, even, the Munis, yogis, etc., they could easily create all these things. But that's not the way that Krishna's culture was run. Of course, we use these things in the preaching of Krishna consciousness. Even then, we should uh, not become attached to these various objects. Just like even if we use some form of materialistic philosophy, we should not become attached to the philosophy. And in all ways, we should try to strictly understand and strictly preach what Prabhupada has given us. Because actually, this is the only way to overcome the uh, forces of material misery. The various adjustments that we make, as Chitraketu made, in the form of these various material opulences, won't actually help us. It is actually only by developing Krishna consciousness that we will completely eliminate the miseries of material life. And this consciousness is, of course, of completely becoming a servant of Krishna, which is a very high platform. It is not to actually completely mitigate the miseries of material life. It is not just taking our life as it was and adding a little bit of Krishna. That, of course, is the beginning stages. But it is actually completely living our lives 100% for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, practicing pure bhakti yoga. And in between, we either repress or dovetail our material desires until they are purified. And this is done in various ways. The most complete system, or the most comprehensive system, is of course the Varnashram Dharma system. 4 Varnas and 4 Ashrams, where one takes one's material desires, material propensities, and by engaging them in a social system where everything is directed towards the pleasure of Krishna and is done in a dharmic way, one actually makes advancement in that way. And of course, through the processes of devotional service, uh, are the ultimate ways of making this advancement. So, all in all, we should try to understand that actually material life, material philosophy, is actually a worse way to live than spiritual life. And we should try to explain this to others in the form of preaching. That, by trying to enjoy our senses, the ways of materialistic society, that there's so much actual suffering, and that to get rid of the platform of suffering or to come off the platform of suffering, one should take up pure Krishna consciousness taught by Prabhupada and the Acharyas, and in that way perfect one's life. So we have a bit to go. I'll end here. I feel like today I was a bit more disorganized in my thinking than on other days that I give class, but hopefully somebody got something out of it. So I will open the floor for discussions. Yes, Dina Pollicott.
City, city life and the rise in mental health.
Yeah, if I can find that study, I will send it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments, additions, subtractions? Hmm.
How do you bridge the gap between Western preaching and preaching in like a temple environment? Like I come from Western preaching, so for me, preaching to someone like, oh, this is the deity, this is Krishna, it's like very strange to do that.
So what Western preaching, you mean
Like bridge preaching.
lost programs,
Yeah.
things like that?
So,
Okay,
it's
yeah. So the question for those who didn't hear is how do you bridge the gap between more kind of loft style uh, preaching and uh, bringing them to the temple and the deities and all of the aspects of Krishna consciousness that might be kind of jarring to somebody from non-Vedic or non or a culture that isn't so much influenced by Vedic civilization. And I think I can just speak personally of what went on for me is going through the books with them. There's this quote, I think Dr. Prabhu said it during the discussion session a couple of weeks ago, where Prabhupada was saying, it's better, sorry, better to give them books. We are preaching for a limited amount of time, but the books, people take them home with them, hopefully read them, etc. And then you're available there to answer questions. Uh, and if they're actually reading the book, so they should be encouraged to actually read the book, not just skim open to random pages. As Gurudev says, when people ask him, how do you read, oh, how should we read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam? I says, you start at page one, you read it, then you go to page two, and then you read it, and then so on. And then be available to answer questions, which for certain uh, people can be quite voluminous. I know when I was first reading Bhagavad Gita, I had the little sticky notes, I had the little tab ones. So you mark things where they are in books. Every time I had a question, I would put a little sticky note there in Bhagavad Gita. Uh, I probably throughout the entire thing had at least 100 sticky notes, probably a lot more. And I would go and either before or after the Bhagavad Gita discussion program on Fridays at Montreal, I would talk with Mangalarti and ask her whatever questions that I had. And she was actually able to answer them, which, for more philosophically minded people is, very attractive, or it attracts them a lot to the philosophy. Because, I can say from my personal experience, as somebody who was into all these like philosophies and sciences and things like that, everywhere at some point they always break down. If one is going through, the philosophy of anybody, any material philosopher, there's always some point where, they make an unfounded assumption, or the logic isn't there, or, you can see they're just influenced by something else, or they're just saying nonsense things that sound okay but are just bewildering to the intelligence. And when people like that, people like myself, and it's actually, well, every question that you have, there's actually an answer to it. There's no breakdown in logic anywhere, or unfounded assumptions anywhere. That will actually be very attractive to them. It'll attract them to the philosophy. And then actually bring them to the temple after that, the deities. It isn't such a big deal, in my opinion. If you bring them, they're the first time somebody off the street, it might be a, big shock. What are these, you know, what they consider statues, people dressed in non-Western clothes, things like that. Uh, but after somebody has been coming for a while and uh, reading philosophy and things like that, I don't think people usually have such a big problem if they've been acculturated to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, becoming acculturated to the culture of Krishna consciousness. Uh, because somebody can accept that God is a little blue boy who likes to herd cows and having a peacock feather in his hair. Then deities and saris and deities um, shouldn't be too hard to accept after one has already accepted that truth. So hopefully those thoughts help you. If not, I guess you might be running out of the puja to ask a follow-up question. I don't hear footsteps, so hopefully that was sufficient to answer my Paulina's question. Are there any other comments, questions, etc.? It's 12-ish minutes of class.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I will Tarka.
Yeah, I just my first thoughts when I heard these verses was that to attempt to conceive a child through so many wives and fail consistently would ordinarily lead one to the conclusion that the problem is not the wives but the husband. That would seem logical, but the fact that he persisted in marrying additional wives, I'm taking it for granted that he had all kinds of counsel that there were Brahmins and such advising him.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that they had some means by which to ascertain where the problem was and concluded that it was not the king. I'm wondering if you know anything about this, whether you have read anything anywhere about what that process might be, or how they arrived at that conclusion.
Specifically in the case of Chitraketu, uh, I of course don't know anything more than what's in Bhagavatam. But I know generally speaking, of course, Brahmanas uh, were generally learned in different Vedic sciences, one of which is, of course, Ayurveda, which I don't know so much about, where one can probably do all sorts of investigations to see uh, the potency in the bodies of the husband and the wife to actually conceive children. And then, of course, there is the science of Jyotish or Vedic astrology, which actually touches on all the other sciences in the Vedic system as well. And through that, one can ascertain many, many things about people's lives. Because the idea is that the karma that one brings into this life is encoded into the chart, into the position of the planets at the time of birth. And that one who is very expert at reading this information can ascertain so many different things. So likely that when when this issue came up, the astrologers, who were probably also a lot more learned in the science than we are today, because so many texts were destroyed by both the Muslim and the English conquests of India. So they probably had a lot more detail of how to actually to read these things as well. They probably looked at the charts of Chitraketu Maharaj and ascertained that there wasn't a problem. And then, of course, next question is then, well, why don't they just, find a lady, find a potential wife who, by looking in the charts, uh, showed that, she was not barren, that she was actually able to bear children. In which case it was probably that those charts were incompatible with his in other ways. Because ultimately, of course, if it's your karma to have a barren wife, any woman that you could possibly marry, according to the material energy way of doing things, leaving aside the spiritual, the Krishna aspect, just materially speaking, if your chart says you're going to have a barren wife, any wife that you could possibly marry is going to be barren. That's just the way the material energy karma works. So it was probably ascertained either by the science of Ayurveda or by the science of Jyotish, uh, or a combination of the two.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm?
My next question is, let's say you have distributed the sixth canto Bhagavatam to a new person,
Mhm.
and they read this account of King Chitraketu, and so this person then raises the question, how is it possible for this individual to have so many wives? How can you support that many wives? Um, it just seems incredible. So how do you explain that to someone?
Well, this was a different age. You just explained that actually the uh, uh, previous ages, in contradiction to the scientific or evolution worldview, so-called scientific, that we weren't going from a uh, stage of lower uh, advancement to a stage of higher advancement. That actually previous ages were more advanced and had greater opulences in terms of lifespan, material wealth, etc. And that in those days, people could support much more um, wives, even up to 10 million, uh, rather, in contradiction to today, at the age of Kali Yuga. So one basically, just has to be willing or able, willing and able, to explain the Yuga system, and that in previous ages, that things actually were more advanced. And actually, there are a lot of people, more than people might think, that are open to these ideas. I actually, just to tell a little some kirtan story. I remember one time I was doing books in Old City, Philadelphia. Uh, and we were on a corner, and I had a book tape set up. I was trying to stop people distributing books. And these two guys uh, come, like they're walking, and they stop, like they look over the book table. And oh, it's the Bhagavad Gita. I heard about that on Ancient Aliens. Uh, and they actually took books. And these two guys, uh, one time when they saw me trying to distribute to somebody who was kind of like on the fence about taking, when they were passing by again, they actually came and helped me distribute the book, distribute Bhagavad Gita to somebody. And then another time when I was in an argument with the ASPCA, which I've talked about in class before, those activities, they actually came and helped argue, kind of on my side against the ASPCA. And it was like, 3 against 1. So then it was easier to have them back off. So yeah, like people are uh, open, or a lot of people are open to the idea of ancient civilizations and advanced civilizations in the past before some cataclysmic disaster, and all of these ideas. Of course, many aren't, uh, and one can explain to them in a different way. Of course, the antiquity of human life has been explained or been given evidence, uh, or I guess the evidence has been compiled by Sataputsu Prabhu and Druta Karma in Forbidden Archaeology. It's a pretty well-known book. I've even heard people outside of Krishna consciousness talk about it. So people who are reticent to believe it can also be shown that evidence. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Haribol Kala Prabhu, I realize that we have just a minute, so I just want to quickly ask this question. We see that in this pastime or in this verse that Chitraketu is full of anxiety, he's naturally grieving, he's unhappy because he's attached to having a son. And I'm just a little bit curious if you could just share a little bit about this point Prabhupada made at the end of this purport. Nevertheless, he has no issue. Maybe you can comment on that a little bit.
I think issue here means child. Like it's an old or older English way of saying it.
Okay, that's makes sense.
Yeah, I think from the context, that's what's meant by the word issue. Okay, so the conch has sounded. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Sri Radhe. Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Sri Radhe. Jaya Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Sri Radhe. Jaya Lalita Vishaka Lalita Vishaka Sri Radhe. Jaya Nitai Gora Sundar Nitai Gora Sundar Gora Hari. Jaya Nitai Gora Sundar Nitai Gora Sundar Gora Hari. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada. Shri Guru Govinda Kevalam Bhakti Sadma. Shri Guru Charan Bhajna Kevalam Sadma. Manavuri Sabada Nate Manavuri Sabada Jara Prasade Vaha Vaha Jara Krishna Bhakti Roya Krishna Bhakti Roya Ate Vajja Chite Ya Aja Anakori ho ta Tarane Rati Gati Sare Ture Veshatare Ture Ta Ram Ame Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Devam 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 Sri Krishna Nam Kali Vidyana Yadvaita Vedana Vivat Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivastava Gaura Bhakti Namaha Krishna Krishna Hare Rama Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Hare. John Nakata from Super Trial of Dr. Srimad, Divine AC Bhagavatam, Srimad Sarvati. This is on the trial on TV. John Nakata from Super Trial of Bhakti Siddhanta says, Welcome to Swami Mahara, Divine. Ramacharya, that's the court key. Everything. For good, you are there. Krishna, Krishna, Gopinath, Shanti, Period out on another piece. It's always this like Bhakti Devi, Vasi Devi, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vindiki, Hare Nam Sankirtan, Samarika Bhakta Vindiki, Shnipa Yoganande, all ways to some devotees, all ways to some devotees, all ways to some devotees, all ways to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all ways to Prabhupada. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can obtain pure devotional service. By not the lotus feet great on reverence. By his grace, we can contemplate the material suffering of the kings. While in the mission path, my consciousness purified. Attachment to the lotus feet and perfection fulfills all desires. He opened my darkened eyes and filled my heart with the name of God. He is my Lord, very back to him. From him is static and pregnant enemies, divine enemies, destroyed. With any scriptures, sing of the spirit. Our spiritual master, the ocean ranks, Lord and Master of the devotees. Be merciful unto us, give us the strength and words, and famous by all the three ones. In divine grace, we be brought up to our Lord God, He. Prabhu.